sitting in right now. And I want to thank you for coming today to be a part of our first Mahogany Dialogues Artist Talk. This is a series of conversations with artists who are change makers in the arts. Okay, so people who are doing very influential things to circling around the arts in the community here in Racine, but also across the United States. So today we're fortunate to have Mr. René Amado, who is a local artist here in Racine. So we're going to talk with Rene, and he's going to give us some game about his career, his journey, and his life as an artist, creative photographer, and all the good things that he does in the community here. All right, well, welcome, Rene.
Hello.
All right, how you been?
I'm good. I'm real good.
Good. I'm going to read. I forgot to read your bio. Let me read your bio because people have some background information. All right, René Amado, based in Racine, Wisconsin. René Amado began honing his craft around 2013 in the downtown streets of San Antonio, Texas. For Amado, walking the streets and capturing the various scenes and unique individuals he would encounter was a great way to flex his creativity while unwinding from a stressful workday. Since then, he has gone on to work in many other genres of photography, including concert and live music, photojournalism, fashion, weddings, culinary, automotive, portraiture, and documentary. Amado's interest began in the 1980s when he was a young boy thumbing through photography magazines with his father, an amateur photographer, had laying around the house. Later, he enjoyed taking photos at car shows and went on to take classes while in college. Through his exploration of street photography, Amado found a community of artists and self-described street photographers who have helped him define his creative voice and purpose. His journey has taken him from hobbyist to exhibiting artist to professional photographer and now on to high school photography teacher. All the while, regardless of the environment or subject he was working with. Rene has remained true to his street roots at heart, practicing the same techniques and utilizing the same style developed during his early days. All right. Interesting bio, Rene. So let's just jump right into it.
Yeah.
So tell me about, you in your bio here, you mentioned about the exploration of street photography. So, what is street photography?
A lot of people look at street photography as being like portraits on the street. So, like walking around and seeing people and taking people's photos while on the streets. I'm too much of an introvert for that. I'm like really non-confrontational with stuff like that. So I don't want to approach people necessarily unless it feels like they're okay with it. Or I'll just do it very sneakily from across the street or something. But yeah, like I don't necessarily like to do that like how some people do. I've got a friend who will literally just walk up in somebody's face and just take a photo. I don't like that. So for me, street photography was more capturing the environment and, just, little things that you see in your environment that people walk past and don't pay attention to, and garbage on the street, just things like that for whatever reason captured my eye. So.
Gotcha. So you mentioned being an introvert. Is that a unique thing as a photographer, or I
think a lot of photographers definitely identify as that.
As being an introvert? Okay.
It's typical for an artist, and especially photographers, I think.
Sure. That's interesting. Because your work is really expressive, though. You would think that you'd be more of like the opposite. Be more of an extrovert, being, so dynamic with your work, especially like the portraiture. Just the observation.
Yeah, it's definitely something you have to turn on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and the other thing too is a lot of what I capture is very candid moments where I'm just like seeing stuff and capturing it, and it's like a lot of times I don't even talk to who I'm photographing.
So don't even know you're even doing it.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the introvert side.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're capturing.
And honestly, I kind of like it that way a lot of times. Like some, you were saying how you saw me at some of the rallies. I'm not talking to people. I'm not trying to have a conversation with anybody while I'm doing that. I'm like, I'm shooting. Talk to me later, you know. And so, and then for like the street meets that we would do, that was always my thing. I remember one in particular where some guy kept trying to like have a conversation with me, and I was very much like after like 2 times, I'll let him know, like, dude, leave me alone right now. Like I don't want to talk right now.
Right. Well, that makes sense because you're in your element. And you're in that mode. Yeah. Because you may miss some key shots if you start engaging with people in different areas. Yeah. So what I forgot to mention was that Rene was featured in our Black Humanity Now exhibit. So a lot of his photography was from the 2020 marches. The protests and the marches here in Racine. So some of those photos, one behind you in the back, that's one of Rene's work in the back. And there's also in this hallway to the side and in that front gallery, those are also Rene's, some of his work as well. So, the capturing of what you did during those protests, and by the way, that was the first time that here in this community that had happened, like documenting that experience as a community, what we did to rally around those issues around police brutality and all those other issues. So that was pretty historic. And I know we talked about before about how we get into our work and we don't realize like the impact that it's really having because we're just so, we're into the work. So that was amazing. I mean, I love that show and I love the work that you do.
Thank you.
So talk about your so like how do you get here? I mean, how did you get here? What's the journey of Rene to go from young Rene to OG Rene?
Well, I think part of it was that like seeing like my dad, because I never really remember him like as being a photographer and doing stuff, even though he would shoot like weddings and events for like family and friends and things like that. But I remember seeing him a lot of times like sitting at the table putting together like wedding albums for people, and then the part in there about looking through magazines. He always had photography magazines, and I remember even going down over there in West Racine. There was Camera World.
Yeah, Camera World.
I remember going there with him as a kid a lot, and just as a kid, like I was too young to read at the time, and I'm just thumbing through all these magazines, seeing these photos, and I feel like kids are sponges, and so I think just seeing that just kind of got in my head somehow.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't until much later, like I as at like elementary school age, I used to draw a lot, and I really got into all that. Eventually, that turned into like graffiti and stuff like that. And then it was like in middle school where I started discovering like lowrider culture. And I remember I was about 15 or so, and there was a show coming to Chicago, and I like bugged my brother-in-law and my sister and them, see if they wanted to go. And that's where I started like actually like trying to take some photos. And I actually just found a shoebox full of those at my mom's house. So I'll be scanning those and going through those pretty soon.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah.
But yeah, over the years through teenagers into like my 20s, it was all just scattered random moments of like taking photos. And then, it just, once I was in my 30s, it was like I was really stressed out at work. Yeah. And just needing something I've always had like some kind of creative pursuit because I actually used to work with music a lot.
Sure.
Like with Steve and
sure.
And then eventually I just got real tired of that and that whole world. And it was at that point where I was just like, I stopped working with the music, and then it's like I took a break for a while, just kind of clear my head because I was at a really lost point. And then I just kind of dawned on me one day, I was like, I want to start taking photos. And I was here visiting from Texas because I was living out there at the time. And I just thought to ask my dad, I'm like, do you still have those old cameras? And he said, yeah. And I was like, can I have them? And he said, yeah. So I took them all back to Texas with me, and
And the rest is history.
Yeah, started shooting stuff.
And that's cool how you came back to your creative passion. You came back to your creative roots. You talked about you had really into music.
Yeah.
But you expanded. But it's all like you expanded, but simultaneously came back to at the same time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think it all kind of stays related and like within the same realm, because one thing that really that kind of pushed me to be more interested in photography when I got older was doing graphic design. I didn't even mention that, but like being like involved in drawing and graffiti, a lot of people that are graffiti artists eventually jump into graphic design.
True.
And so like when I had the opportunity then to go to college when I was in my young 20s, I went for a graphic design program. Part of that program was to take photography classes. And I think like it's all related just because it's all composition in one way or another.
Indeed.
You know, whether
Yeah,
the design of, you know, putting elements in certain spaces.
Indeed.
And then same thing with photography. It's lining things up to your grid and composing things, you know,
Indeed.
so it's just, you know, using these digital elements versus, you know, people and things.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the same concept.
It's the same thing.
different
Yeah,
medium.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So in terms of, I'll come back to that actually. So here's a question I'd like to ask everyone. So do you identify with being, or what do you identify more with being a Hispanic Latin artist or an artist in general? So let me backtrack. That's one question. So let's ask that question.
I mean, I guess my Hispanic American roots are very dear to me, but like it always bugged me how like people really want to put emphasis on one certain thing of being like I'm this sort of artist or musician or whatever, like where they really put that identity on there. Like, and one of the musicians that I used to know really put emphasis on trying to be the first Mexican rapper to do this and that. And it's just like, in my mind, I don't want to identify with that like as my title, I guess, just because like I'm human first, I'm a person first, I'm me, and it doesn't really matter. That's only a piece of it. That's just, you know, like I don't know. It's hard for me to explain, I guess.
Yeah.
But like I definitely don't run from it. I mean, it's all in my work.
Yeah, right.
But I hate how people do that. You know, it's just be the best of whatever it is you are.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Stop trying to use that as like your gimmick.
Interesting. Okay.
That's the way I see it. You know, it's yeah. I'm not special because I'm Hispanic. I'm just me.
Gotcha.
You know?
Gotcha. So, well, thank you for that. So, what do you feel is, or who inspires you creatively? So, do you have any inspiration from other photographers that maybe you've seen in your work in the past, or you know, who influences your creative energy?
I've never really I hadn't started studying any photographer's work until more recently. It was just always something that I just knew I wanted to do, so I would just do it. But yeah, I guess there's definitely some, especially like some people that I know that like when I was coming up. So down in Texas, there's a couple of guys that I was close to. Freddie Camargo, like everything that guy shoots is just beautiful to me. And then there's another guy, Afro, who he does a lot of street photography. He was the one I was just mentioning where like he'll just get in somebody's face and just shoot a photo.
Sure.
Yeah, his stuff to me is just phenomenal. I love what he does. And then beyond that, I guess there's a street photographer by the name of Boogie. I love his work. Jamal Shabazz, I love his work.
Jamal Shabazz, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Esteban Orio, definitely don't want to forget him.
Who was the last one?
Esteban Orio.
Okay. And where's he based on?
LA.
LA. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like do you get your influences from different parts of the country, or is it more of like, or different parts of the world, or are you celebrating, you know, the heritage or the style? Do you see yourself?
I think everybody whose stuff that I really enjoy, I think with the exception of Freddie, because his is more curated, but like, you know, the people that I just named, Esteban, Afro, Jamal, they're all very like more candid street stuff. You know, it's all at least a little bit grimy. It's all at least a little bit dirty, and it's all very like just kind of like in the moment.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know?
So what are you trying to capture, like when you go out and shoot? Like what is it? What are the elements? Or what are the moments? Or what is the spirit that you're trying to, or do you even try to do that? I don't know.
I don't know.
Like what makes you say like, oh, this is a shot. Like this is it. like that image, for instance, that one. Okay, what called you to that? And that was, by the way, that wasn't staged, right?
No, not at all. Like we were all moving down Washington, or Racine Street actually. And I was walking along the sidewalk. The whole group was pretty much in the streets, and they were just sitting in that yard. And I just looked at them, and I remember the looks on their faces when they were just looking out at everybody. And it's just an intuition, man. It's like I can't really just say like, because again, that wasn't staged. I didn't ask them to do that. I didn't ask them to look at me or anything. I looked at them and just aimed my camera, and it just clicked. You know, so it's a lot of it is intuition on where I'm aiming and what I'm doing, or like sometimes with, you know, anything like this, it's just seeing and looking for the angle and, you know, the way the light is hitting, the way, you know, things are in the background.
More of like the natural elements that really call you, to record it. So like, you know, what you're doing is really documenting. I mean, you're documenting history. That's what you're doing. You know, in a sense, in a large sense. So, you know, we talked about that before about, you know, the significance of what you're doing, but not really realizing that significance like in the moment.
Yep.
So, like even like with these cars, for instance, you know, those are. Well, you speak about those. Speak about this one in particular.
This one stood out to me just because it's got a very old school style to it. Like if you're into like lowriding in the culture, this is a very like 90s and earlier look. People don't really do like that kind of plush interior anymore like that. That's more of an older style. So just seeing that and the exterior of the car, the paint job, the way it is, it's a very old school style. And so it just really caught my eye. And so just, you know, just trying to line things up within that composition to where they make sense to me and they feel right, and it just captures what I want. You know, and so that's really what was going on there. It just felt good to me.
Sure. So, excuse me. So the tools that you use, the tools are the tools helping you to, you know, take those concepts and those ideas into how you want them to be. So, or are the tools really just like, are the tools a vessel to help communicate what you're trying to communicate, or is it more of a, are the tools just that, like tools?
No, I think I was talking with my friend Luke over there about how this whole summer I've really put an emphasis on shooting film photography, so 35 millimeter and 120. And it definitely, you know, he's seen a lot of my stuff, and it changes the essence, it changes the feel, it changes everything, I feel like, because if I was to take a photograph of all of you, somebody with a digital camera, somebody in the crowd is gonna be like, can I see that? How do I look? Somebody's gonna want to see that and know, you know, what they look like. And they're gonna ask, and if something isn't right, then they're gonna want to take it over again. And we could spend the next 10 minutes trying to find the right angle, and I look fat in this one, I was blinking, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Versus when like shooting film, you just got like, there's 36 shots on here. This roll probably cost me $15 to buy, and it's going to cost me another $10 to $15 to develop. I'm not taking another shot.
Yeah.
So it's like I got it. Don't worry about it. Like you'll see it later.
Yeah.
So it definitely changes. And like I remember like this day in particular, I had just bought this really cheap lens that would go on this camera, and it's a very basic lens. It's really small. When I put that lens on that camera, I can put it in my pocket and walk around with it, and it's hardly noticeable, unlike these bigger lenses that I have.
Sure.
And so I was working with some very basic tools when I shot this one. So it can definitely change the look because your lenses are gonna, you know, create the image, and so the quality of the lens is gonna give a more clear image. It's gonna be better focus, different kind of focus. So it does have some, you know, it does, you know, dictate how it's going to come out, you know. And then, like I said, with film, you're definitely going to get a different look and different tones and different everything.
And that's a natural thing with film.
Yeah, because I've really, I've spent a lot of money on film stuff this summer. I bought a lot of lenses. You know, I keep going to thrift stores and looking for them just because like the different lenses, because they're decades older, they've got wear and tear on them. They've got dust in them. They're all unique. They're all their own fingerprint. You know, so yeah, I've noticed that, and I just like I'll shoot with one and be like, all right, I got to find another one now.
Yeah.
And like I just had a friend take a photo of me like with all my cameras on it. It just looks ridiculous. It's like 14 cameras, so like yeah.
So these relics are like gold mines. It's like a gold mine to you. Yeah. It's like that saying, another person's junk is another person's treasure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
That's cool. Well, I'm sure those thrift stores love you, man, when they see you walking in. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So what do you think, talk about some of your challenges, like in the process of your work, or your challenges in whether finding shots or working with some of the tools you just mentioned, working with other people. What are some of the challenges that you face and encounter?
Biggest challenge is time. Finding time for everything. You know, like I've got 10 recent shoots I still haven't edited yet, and it's just like I don't know when I'll get to it. You know, so that's definitely a challenge.
So did you envision yourself being an entrepreneur, like using photography being your thing? Like
nah.
Never envisioned that.
Like I said, I went to school for graphic design, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed building websites and that kind of thing. And so I looked at that as like a career, and eventually later when I thought I'm going to jump into photography, it was never anything I envisioned having as a business or like even doing stuff like this. It was just more of like, I need a creative outlet, and you know, I'm stressed out right now and I need a new creative outlet. And so that's why I went into it.
Right.
And it just wasn't until like I started getting into it, I started feeling like I was good at it. People saw my work and saw that I was good at it. It was maybe close to 2 years after I first started with my dad's cameras that somebody gave me an opportunity to show stuff. And that night, I think I sold like 4 or 5 out of like, it was like a dozen prints that I was showing. And so that's when it started to click, like, okay, there's something here. Like there was always an intention to print because like, you know, that's how I grew up. You buy prints, you have prints.
Right.
And so there was always the intention to print my work, but I just never knew anything about this whole world of, you know, being a working artist or an artist who sells stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even like as a kid, it just never really resonated.
Nah.
Yeah. So talk about your childhood. Talk about your dad a little bit. You know, how did he help shape your shape your path?
My dad was one of those guys who could do everything and anything. Like he could fix your car and build you a house. You know, it's like it and I was around for a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so like people that know me well know that like I've worked with music. I could, you know, like I could do music, I can work in a studio and do all that. I can do videos, I can do graphic design, I can build websites. Like I'm like a one-man show as well.
So you're basically a version of your dad, just in the 21st century.
Yeah, I'm the digital version.
Yeah, right on.
So yeah, like I
have you ever told him that?
I don't know.
No, yeah. Well, you should. I mean, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your role as an educator. You're a teacher. I think a lot of people don't need to know that.
Yeah.
That you're an educator as well. You've always been an educator, but now like you're like formally an educator in a school setting. So let's talk about that.
That's a funny thing to me because there's like people that know me from one of the things that I do but don't know about these other things. Like there's most of the people that, especially like the people that got to know me after coming back here from Texas, never knew that I used to do music and stuff like that. And so like, yeah, there's people that only know like this one little piece of me. And so that's a pretty normal thing for me to like, oh yeah, that's me too.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't like try to hide any of that. It's just, I don't know, I move on from things.
Right.
And so I don't even like some people that knew me back in those days of music want me to go back to doing stuff like that. I'm like, no, like I've moved on. Like I'm done. That's over.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like that with a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know.
But that's growth, right? Would you consider that to be growth?
Yeah. I think it's expansion. It's, you know, yeah, it's just me growing into new versions of me.
Right.
You know, I think that people are supposed to do that.
So tell me about so how are the young people engaging with you as an educator? Now talk about some of the experiences that you had with, you know, in that role of wearing that hat as a teacher at school.
Yeah.
School,
I think it's a change of pace for them. Well, I don't know how else to be other than who I am. I never went to school to be a teacher. I don't know anything about that. And so I pretty much last year I've like signed my papers to be a teacher like the day before the teachers went back to school. So I was walking in not knowing what was going on or what I was supposed to do or anything. And so I just came in there and presented myself to them like I present myself to you all. And I'm showing them the same kind of work. And so it's not like, I looked over like the teacher who was there before me, I looked over their curriculum and it just seemed really bland. It just seemed like I didn't think it would be fun for me to do. And I didn't really understand like how to be a teacher and teach those lessons the way they had them laid out.
What they were doing.
I didn't know how to do that. And so I just pretty much threw it all to the side and was like, I'm just going to go in there as me, tell them like, I'm never been a teacher. I don't know how to be a teacher. I'm an artist. I'm a business person. This is who I am. And like, I think that like right away, I saw certain students kind of like, you know, they kind of like peeked their heads up like, who's this dude? Like what? And so I think it was just like, yeah, because I'm not a trained teacher, it's very different, I think.
So do you feel because of that, like you got some street cred kind of, right? Would you say that?
Sure.
Yeah, and then also being a Hispanic male, that's a whole nother dimension.
I definitely noticed that with like Hispanic students, like they were a little surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely made some good connections there with those kids.
So how did you respond to that? Like, you know, was that a bridge for you to connect with the kids because of that?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, all right, cool. What are some of the, so as a teacher, what are some of the things that you want the students to really take away?
You know, more than anything, I just want to give them a safe space where they could just be themselves. I feel like as a student, when I was in schools, I never had any, I really only remember 2 teachers from my entire time at school. And the only reason, well, one of them was my 2nd grade teacher because she felt like another mom. Like she was just very nurturing, you know? And so she was really nice that way. Like I felt like I could do anything, like I could break down and cry in front of her and she would just like hold me or something, you know? She was really nice that way. And then I think it was my 3rd grade teacher who was just like, she was a lot of fun. Other than that, like I never really had teachers that I felt like did anything for me.
Sure.
You know, and so I thought about that, like going into the classroom, like, you know, I want the students to, I want to connect with them, you know? I want them to know that there's somebody in front of this room that like, you know, I give a shit.
Right.
You know, and it's like, I want you to feel safe. I want you to be creative. I want you to, you know, expand who you are in this classroom somehow, you know?
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. And for the most part, that's been working.
I feel like it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Have you ever had to kick somebody out?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because if you have not done that, then you're not really a teacher yet.
No, yeah, I've definitely, yeah. Timbers heard me.
Right. No, but you know, I say that because you know I'm a former teacher too, and sometimes you have to remove people only to have them come back.
Oh yeah.
So you can have that one-on-one conversation about why that needed to take place and what can we do to not make that happen again.
Yeah. I've definitely had those conversations.
Yeah. That's just a part of that's like cutting your teeth, man, in the classroom, man. That is what it is.
Yeah.
So tell me what is success to you? What is that? What is success to René Amado?
Just feeling good about what I'm doing. I don't know. I mean, I don't. A lot of people want to equate success with like monetary things or material things and stuff like that, and it's like, nah. I just need to feel good about what I'm doing.
So there's a sort of a mantra where if you commit to your passion, like all the other stuff will happen, like the material things, the money, and all that stuff will happen. Do you subscribe to that as well?
Yeah, I feel like I'm watching that happen.
Yeah, like literally, like right in front of your eyes. Yeah, right on.
So,
that's dope. And I'm gonna throw the audience the opportunity to ask a question. So, does anyone have a question right now? Anyone? Okay. Well, if you do, just feel free to raise your hand, and we'll get you in the mix.
I do.
Okay.
You mentioned before about how you see a shot in your mind and you determine whether it fits in your grid. Meaning, are you actually using the grid on the camera to frame your shot, or are you just clicking and hoping to catch what you want? Or maybe you're doing a lot of cropping?
It depends. So like with the march photo, the protest photos, a lot of that, it's more about capturing whatever it is that's happening rather than trying to get the shot perfect. Because if I sit and try to compose it perfectly while it's happening, I just might miss it. Right. If I sit and worry about, is my exposure too high or too low or whatever, I might miss it. And so in those moments of, like those kids or like any of the other protest ones here, it's more about just getting it. And a lot of my photos I will actually crop into. And I'm not afraid to say that. I know there's a lot of old school photographers that are like, get it right in camera. Like they don't believe in cropping. And I think that's so dumb, especially in the world of Photoshop and digital cameras with high megapixels. Right. Like you can fix it, especially now with with Photoshop and their ability to like enlarge your images. You hardly notice that you enlarged it nowadays. So to me, it's like, I'll admit that like a lot of my photos were actually are cropped in from something, and so I'm not shooting these things perfectly as is. Yeah.
That's the magic of this digital world. I
try to think about that more now with film, because you have to take your time more with film, and if you don't get it right, you're going to kick yourself in the ass later. And that's one of the reasons why I started shooting film this summer, was because digital is very easy to do. And film is just a lot more of a challenge, and it makes you slow down and think about it. And it also makes you accept imperfect moments. Like I was saying earlier, if somebody was blinking, if they weren't looking, whatever, you just got to take it and laugh at it later. So, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, and as far as like you mentioned the grid, like rule of thirds and things like that, I keep it in mind, and I like to try for that, but I don't let it stop me from taking a photo if something doesn't align perfectly. Yeah. Especially like with like something like that, like obviously the car isn't moving and nothing's moving there. So I can take all the time I want to take that shot. And so for that, I lined that up a specific way and how I wanted it. So.
Thank you.
Oh, I saw the both of you.
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead. I just have a question about, I know you put together the yearbook this year for Case. Like, how was that like for you and the students?
A lot of it was me. The yearbook class was hard just because, there's a real product that comes with that rather than just giving kids a grade. And so there was a lot to do. There was a lot for me to figure out and learn. And I didn't know how to teach that at sometimes to the students, because you have to teach them how to take photos, design, put together layouts and all of these things. And just with the madness that last year's school year was, a lot of it just fell into my hands of like, just give them something to do, and then I have to fix it at some point. And so, yeah, it was fun because it took me out to a lot of the games and activities, and I got students involved with that. And I let students like take photos using my cameras and whatnot. And I know they enjoyed that. But yeah, that was a tough one.
So you produced a whole yearbook?
Yeah,
Wow, that had to be a lot of work.
it was.
You're talking about shooting, organizing the content, doing the layout.
Yeah.
All those things.
You know, like I said, a lot of it, well, there was definitely a bunch of pages that students would do, and I would look at it like, you know what, that's good enough. Just let it go. Because we were because of me and just being new to everything, like we were behind on deadlines the whole year. And so there was a lot of stuff that I wish we could have made a little better and a little cleaner, but we just had to let it go. And then there was a lot of things where I really stepped in and was like, no, we need to fix this page up really nice. And so I would step in and, put in my expertise and experience on that.
Yeah, right on.
So, yeah, it was a lot.
You had mentioned Photoshop. I'm just curious, to what degree do you use Photoshop, and what is your belief system around Photoshop?
I try to just use it for cropping and then like exposure correction, color correction, things like that. I really try not to change any elements. Like, just looking at that photo in the background, like I wouldn't have tried to like take anybody out, or if something was in the scene somewhere, like I wouldn't have. I don't like to do that. I don't like to take things out or put things in at all. Instead, for me, Photoshop is just like, being in the studio, like with old school equipment, and you're dodging and burning and stuff like that. It's just getting the exposure right and to where it looks like I want it to look. And the nice thing about Photoshop nowadays is, back before with old equipment, you're using filters on your lenses and things like that. And now it's like I can go through all of that in Photoshop and give it a warmth that I like. Like I know this one I desaturated it some, and I pulled some colors and things like that. And so it gives you a little bit more creativity that way. And yeah, I like to use it for that, but I don't like to overdo it. What's up?
Yes, Tyler.
I guess this might be something that you talk to your students about, but for people that are going into photography that are totally new, what are some of the things that you recommend keeping in mind for those people, like as they're doing it?
So what to keep in mind as you start out doing photography?
Yeah.
Just take photos, and go with what feels right. There's a lot of principles that go along with it. Like we were talking earlier, rule of thirds, different composition techniques, and that's a lot of what I teach my students. That's what I try to show them. But there's a lot of really good photos that don't follow any of those rules. They just feel good. And so I really stress not getting too wrapped up in the technicalities of a photo. I remember a long time ago, I was having a conversation with a guy who was a veteran photographer. He was probably in his 60s or 70s or something, had been doing it since he was young. And he was talking about judging a photo contest. And the other judges for the contest were a little younger and different, I guess. And there was a photo that he really liked that was perfect lighting, perfect composition, perfect. Everything was technically perfect in the photo, and he thought it was amazing. And then everybody else that was judging wanted this other photo that was slightly out of focus, and it was like a kid running across a pier to like hug his mom or something like that. And everybody loved the essence of that photo. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it felt good. And so that's one of the things that I really stress is like, don't worry about the technicalities so much, go with what feels good. As long as you're enjoying it, just do it. And keep going on that. And a lot of really like, I guess, photographers that are like renowned photographers, that's what it is. It's more of a feeling instead of being technically perfect. And there was something else I was going to throw in there, and I can't remember what it was now.
Can come back to you.
Yeah, but that's essentially it.
Good. Great questions. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. So how does your art practice influence your involvement in the community? Or does it?
Yeah. Well, looking around Racine, it's a very industrial, place, and the walls are very plain. There's not a lot to look at, and some of the architecture is old and it's cool looking, but it's boring to me, And I remember being down in like San Antonio, and there's art everywhere. There's murals all over the town. There's art installations everywhere. And it just, to me, it feels better to walk around and see things like that rather than plain white walls or gray walls or cream colored brick or whatever, And so, moving back here, that was one of the big things in my mind of like trying to get more things to happen that way. Having more art in the community and, all the art for Uptown stuff. I actually designed that logo. I was sitting across at the branch with Christina having that discussion, and it just came out like, let's just call this thing Art for Uptown. And so that was something that I helped start, and I want to see more of that around here. Like, I don't see why people are so afraid of having a mural on a building. Like, having a mural on a building it's not vandalism, it's not graffiti, it's not negative, it's not bad. It's nothing to be scared of.
Right.
It to me it makes people feel better to go out and see stuff like that. And especially when the artists involved are artists in the community, to be able to go out and see that your work is being supported and that people are Instagramming and taking photos of it and going to a neighborhood to go see it and whatnot, So it's very intentional of what I do to want to see it out in public and have the community involved in it and to just get more of that out here. And I think another part of it too that I've talked about in other places numerous times is like growing up and seeing how industrial this place is and how me growing up feeling like I'll probably just end up with a job at Case like my dad had and that's my future. And then not wanting to accept that later on once, I got laid off from like 3 different jobs in a row and was just like, I'm tired of this. And that's when I ended up going to school. And, just wanting to see change because I've always been a creative. I've always had that in me. And it's like, there's other paths, there's other ways to go. And, it's like now, it's like, that's not going to change. Like I'm very, like, this is my path now. This is what I'm doing.
So is that one of the reasons why you came back to Racine to kind of put your stamp on changing that whole?
I came back just because of like I was saying, that job that I was working around that time.
Sure.
It was too much on me. I was just really stressed out and just really needed a lot of pressure, like you just said, and I just really needed a change.
Sure.
And
Go ahead.
I didn't feel like I felt like coming back here and just being back at home and because I was out there by myself. I knew people, like when I moved out there, I knew some people, but I was more on my own. And so, it was like coming back here and just being around family and friends and things that I was a little more familiar and comfortable with. I needed that.
So you touched on a few things. One of them is that how there is a large void here in this community in terms of public art, for one, and so that embracing that mindset that yes, we can have public art, and it's actually it's a mechanism to bring people to the community and embrace the community and get engaged with the community. So what do you feel like if it was up to you? I mean, and it kind of is. I mean, it's up to all of us really, but like, how would that change? What would that look like? So part of the conversations Christina and I have had are, we've talked with, well, she has more than me, but the people that started like Black Cat Alley and that whole organization that does a lot of those murals in Milwaukee and, gets a lot of that going. And they were talking about financial impact on neighborhoods and how that can bring, that kind of thing up, the economics of a neighborhood.
it can bring it all up and encourage customers and sales and things like that in the neighborhood. And of course, we all live in this capitalist society where money is needed. So that's good in that sense. But at the same time, like, I want to see it more just for people having a voice. I want to see it more just so that people can feel like they're heard. Like Black Humanity Now. That's putting emphasis on a community and getting that heard. That's not because you're going to make $1 million off this one day, And I think a lot of people, the unfortunate thing with bringing art into communities is there are a lot of people that are looking at that monetary side of things and is like, this is going to bring my business up. And it's like, that's cool. But at the same time, like I said earlier, like, money doesn't, come into my idea of success at all. It's more about feeling satisfied. And so for me, it's just about community voices. It's more about, people feeling like they're heard and like they have a platform to say something, and a lot of it, even if you're not an artistic person, like a lot of people go to like these paint and sip type events and they've never painted in their life, and maybe, whatever they paint isn't that great, but they have fun. They enjoy it. And so to me, that's also part of it. It's like, it's the enjoyment of it. It makes people feel better.
Yeah, dude. It's good. I mean, communities I've been around across the country that have like embraced that, you get that, like you feel it. You can almost like touch it.
Yeah.
You can sense it, grab it. So yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do here in our community. So, but I appreciate you for doing what you are doing to help add to that. Not only just the community, but the kids that you work with in the school. Because we talked about this before, about you never really know the type of impact you're having until like 10, 20 years later, when some kid will come see you at the grocery store or something. You're like, oh man, that's Mr. Rene, Mr. Mark, man, you're my favorite teacher. They never told you that, like back in the day, right? It's like, oh man, I didn't know that. Well, that's cool. Thanks for that.
I try not to think about any of that.
Yeah.
I really don't, just because like I don't want it to. I want to be in the moment with them. I don't want to like you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because they're not really thinking about that. They're just trying to get through that particular task or that day or.
And so am I.
Right.
I'm like, let's just get through another class. Come on. Lunch is next. Let's go.
Right. 219 hit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, cool, man. I've asked you a lot of the questions that I really wanted to, touch on, and you have some really interesting insight. Is there anything that you want the audience to take away from you and this experience? What do you want them to learn, or what do you have a challenge for them?
A challenge? I guess if there's one thing that I've learned from doing all the different types of photography that I've done, like recently I shot like 3 events. And, like I was saying earlier with film photography, it's like you take your one shot and you got to accept it and hope that it came out right. And I've noticed that like being at some of these events that I shoot, I'm so like stuck in my camera, I miss the entire event. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's like I'm stuck looking at what the photo is rather than actually enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's one thing that I've consciously thought about a lot, and I actually had a conversation, I can't remember with who recently about that. And so it's like I'm trying to still enjoy my work and my craft, but not forget about living and enjoying like the moments.
Yeah. Well, it's like that event at Wingspread, like I saw you. You were you were doing your thing. You had a gear on, you had your doing your thing, and then I remember I think I saw you stopped and you were eating.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself like, well, dang, I never saw Rene actually sit down and chilling, not shooting anything.
I'm good for that. I get in go mode and I'm just moving. Yeah, and I'll just move until I crash, and then yeah. I thought that was pretty. I got to stop doing that.
one or two more questions.
Sure.
I also like to ask this question as well. If you could have a conversation with anyone, whether it being in the art world or just anyone in general that may have been, an influence in your life, or someone you're willing to learn from, who would that be?
Esteban Oriol. He's so if anybody that doesn't know who he is, he's a Hispanic photographer from Los Angeles. He got started in the 90s. He was just somebody that was working like regular jobs, and his father was an artist, and somehow, well, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but he started doing like tour management for bands and artists in LA. And then his dad one day was like, you're in all these cool places doing all these cool things. Take a camera with you. And his dad gave him a camera, and he was just like, okay. And so he started taking photos. And this is in the 90s when people were photographers, and it wasn't like everybody's getting photos on their phones. And so he started just like reaching out to magazines and whatnot, like, hey, I got these photos from backstage. You want to use them? And so he started selling photos and just became like this iconic photographer of LA. And yeah, like back in the 90s, I remember seeing his name like in album credits. I remember seeing his name in magazine credits. Yeah. And there was no social media. I had no idea who this guy was. I just kept seeing his name. And without, knowing who he was, he could be sitting right here and I had no clue until somebody would introduce him. Like I knew his work and I knew who he was. And so like seeing it now, seeing him on social media, seeing him in documentaries and things like that, it just brings it that much closer. It's like, it's so cool to me that he's still going and still prolific in his work and still, a very sought after photographer. And yeah, just like as a teenager, before I even was studying anyone, I was looking at his work just because it was on the albums that I was listening to. It was in the magazines I was looking at, and I just kept recognizing that name. And it's like, he probably had an influence on me before I even thought anybody was influencing me at all.
Yeah.
So and he's a very approachable person from what I hear. Like I know some people that have actually like met him and talked with him and worked with him, and everybody says like he's a very regular person, like that would just walk through this door and take a seat and just be here. So like he would be very cool to sit and talk to.
Wow. And what's his name again?
Esteban Oriol.
Okay, Esteban Oriol.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Close enough. That was a question I was going to ask you right on the tip of my tongue, and it has slipped my mind. Let me see if I can pick it back up.
How do you spell his last name?
Oriol. Oriol.
Esteban?
Yep.
Yes, so two things.
Now we can Google.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So what can institutions, galleries, and other, exhibit spaces and other, places, what can they do to elevate Latino artists and their work?
Well, you and I were in a conversation once about this with a couple people from RAM. And one of the things that, like I was saying, when I was younger, I never thought about this whole world and being a part of it. And I mean, I would, all the schools would go to Worcester on field trips and museums and whatnot. And I never thought about art and anything like that. And especially like, as a Hispanic, I never thought about any of that because I never knew any Hispanic artists. And this might be a crazy thing to say, but it was just like, you see a lot of white people as artists, I think, and so like, I never thought about that for myself or whatever, I didn't know about that. And so, I think it's just inclusion and just like, not to the point where you're like, just, I don't know. It's a fine line to like be like you're really aiming for it and it's not genuine, and then also just like letting people know like you're welcome here. It's okay. Like come on in, And so I think that's part of it is just like making sure that people don't feel separated.
Sure.
you know, like segregated, like they can't be a part of it. And so
So,
I'm-
so your question, to the question you were saying, to have these institutions and these spaces be
inclusive, yeah,
inclusive and
inclusive, yeah.
inviting people, right?
Yeah, and even like with the programming and things that they do, it's, you know, think about others, you know, and how could you make that part of it? And I see a lot of places nowadays doing things based around like Dia de los Muertos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they do it because it looks cool, you know, the sugar skulls and Catrina, you know, it looks cool. But you know, it's like, do you know anything about that? Like, don't just do it because it's marketable. You know, understand it and get people involved that really know the traditions and know what that's about. You know, like I was saying, it's a fine line between doing it as a gimmick and then also just being genuine about it.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, I things like that I'm very sensitive about with
Sure.
that, you know what I'm saying? And I think people should be. And you know, those are like Dia de los Muertos. That's like a tradition that goes back to, you know,
Forever.
centuries ago,
Right.
you know, with indigenous cultures in you know, Latin America. So yeah, it's like, don't just take that and
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you saying too is also like the comparable would be like, you know, you have Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage Month. Like, you know, our culture should be celebrated and included, not just 30 days out of the year, just acknowledging those contributions historically.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's American history too.
Yeah, right on. Last question. Okay, so we've been here for an hour and well, a little bit longer now, but that's fine. So what do you want your backtrack? Okay, so what do you feel your work adds to this lexicon of photography in general? What would you like to add to that? Or what do you feel your work adds to that? It's kind of a big question.
Yeah.
But like, what do you feel like what makes René Amado's work? How does that add to? You talk about your the photographer out of LA,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, how does that compare to what you bring to this whole historical narrative?
It's I don't think about the big picture like that. I do what I do because I enjoy it, and if others enjoy it with me, that's awesome. That's a bonus, you know. So I don't really think about what I'm adding to the big picture. You know, maybe I should start thinking about that. But for me, it's like I said, I started taking photos because I was stressed out and needed a creative outlet, and it turned into this other thing that I didn't exactly see. And so I really try to, you know, in my bio where it says I try to stay true to that. I try to keep that mentality of like, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for other people. I want to share it with other people because maybe they'll enjoy it like I do, but I'm doing it for me. And there's a lot of stuff that I shoot that I don't even show anyone, you know, and it's just because I wanted to shoot it, and I don't think about whether anybody else is going to see it. I don't, you know, sometimes I want to show it, and other times it's like, no, this is mine.
Yeah, it's yours. Yeah. So have you seen it? Have you gotten like really attached to your work to the point where at some point in your career, like that's for you and that's you only, and you didn't want to sell it, or you didn't want to show it?
There's definitely prints that I've kept for myself. Like I said, there's the one on the wall over there that, you know, everything else over there is for sale except for the one. I'm keeping that one. And there's another one at home. I told myself a long time ago, like, I'm only going to print like 5 of each photo. And I've tried to stay true to that. And there's definitely a few that have gone beyond 5. But yeah, there's another one sitting at home. That's another one of my favorite photos that I'll never sell to anybody. I'm going to keep that one. So yeah, there's definitely,
Wow.
but at the same time, like I said, I do want people to see it, especially with stuff like this, because, you know, I've seen it with my students where they've never seen this kind of culture and things, and it's opening their eyes to different things. And so I feel it's important to show stuff, but at the same time, it's also important to keep things to yourself. So, you know, that you got to keep a balance, you know, figure out what's for everyone and what's for me. You know, I got to figure that out. So.
Wow. Fantastic. That's dope, Rene. Well, that's all the questions that I have. Any questions from the audience? One more before we shoot out? Yes.
How long have you, I have a question to comment. How long have you been teaching?
This is my second year.
Please do not underestimate your power of influence. And you speak about inclusion in the art world, and those students are seeing you as an example of that. And like you said, when you were younger, you didn't see faces like you out there. And
Yeah.
they're having this opportunity to experience you. And don't be shy to share those things with them, because you are such an impactful.
Timber knows. She's seen me in the school before. Like she's worked that case, and she knows that. Like I get really involved with my students, and that's part of the reason. And that was a big motivation for why I signed that contract. You know, it was, for one, you know, having steady regular income after like 2020 was kind of important. But but yeah, like I've thought about that, you know, and I want students to feel like it's okay. You know, whatever it is that you are, whatever it is that you do, you know, like that's fine. You know, if nobody else tells you that, I'll tell you that.
I think you could invite them to things like this too.
What's that?
I think you could invite them to things like this as well. See you in action outside. You exist outside of brick walls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe feel different about that, but I think it's important for them to see you.
Yeah.
So they're like, he kicked me out last week. I'm not going.
Can you talk a little about Latino Student Union? You're part of that, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you want
Yeah.
to speak on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some students last year were looking to start a Latino student union, and they spoke with me and another teacher who had also had some conversations with some student, and so we became the advisors for that club. And I mean, I'm still figuring it out. I don't know necessarily what to do with the club. I'm still figuring out how to really be in my classroom with my students. And so, but it's important. I want those students to feel like they have community instead of, you know, just their friends. You know, there's more than that. And we've already seen that happen with the students that became the leadership of it. A lot of them didn't know each other before, you know, that group. And so, yeah, I want them to feel connected. And I feel like within Hispanics and the Latino community, you get separations between those that are born here, those that are born in Mexico, and just, you know, the different, you know, groups within that. And there's a lot of racism within even our own community. There's a lot of like segregation within our own people. And it's stupid. You know, I don't want to see that. You know, you're all the same. We all, maybe I don't speak that good of Spanish, you know, but I love my culture. You know, I'm not going to deny anybody that speaks Spanish to me. It'll be a little tough for us to communicate at times, but you know, like if you need help, I got you. You know, and it's like I want my students to feel the same way too. I don't want them to feel like they can't talk to this student because he predominantly speaks Spanish or whatever. You know, like I don't know. Like we're a community. We got to stick together. You know, there's a lot against this already. Like we don't need to make it harder on ourselves. You know.
You know, I was going to add too. You mentioned like with the Latino Student Union, and you said you weren't quite sure like what to do, but like what you're doing, like that's it. Like what you're doing is getting these young people together so they can start.
You just got to get started.
Yeah, so they can start networking with each other, learning who each other, you know, who they are, and you know that's big. This is right. It's not really about like doing something per se, you know. But like that is the thing that you're doing, you know, and that's going to spark other things.
Yeah, just like a lot of what I did in the classroom, it's like I'll figure it out as I go. Like it'll come together at some point.
Yeah, right on, right on. Right on.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I do remember our short conversation out in the courthouse, and I was wondering how I could view your pictures. I was watching you take pictures, and I wanted to see them. And you told me I could follow you on Facebook, which I do. My question is, how do you feel? Like, I believe in like giving photo credit if you're going to share a picture or whatever. But how do you feel if someone shares your photo or actually like saves your photo and then reuse it? What does that make you feel like as an artist?
Well, I guess it depends on how they use it and who they are. Like, you know, within the social media world nowadays, there's a lot of retweeting, reposting, sharing, all of that kind of thing. And so you can't get around it. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are that will steal somebody's photo and repost it and try to claim it as their own. That exists. And so you can't get around it. So if you're putting photos out there, you've got to accept that, you know, that's part of it. You know, that's part of the contract you're signing by putting photos online. And so I don't mind that. You know, like to me, it's cool. It widens my audience then. If you know 100 people that I don't know and all of a sudden they see the photo and like it, now they know my name. So I think that's cool. As far as like, I've had a couple people approach me about using my photos for like their own art and doing stuff. And I'm more particular about that. You know, like if I want to know who you are, what you're doing, what your work looks like, and I want to know that there's actual like chemistry here on both ends rather than you just loving my photo.
Right.
You know, and I appreciate that someone would want to do that, but I mean, my work is, I mean, these are like my babies, you know, it's like, I want to know where they're at and what's going on with them, you know. And I had someone recently, I was in LA, I was shooting like one of the car meetups out there, and I posted a photo of a guy's car. You were just talking about it.
Yeah,
it shows like his car club, like their plaque, and then it's got like a palm tree in the background, and the dude really loved the photo and he wanted to use it for a t-shirt, and he asked me to send him the original so that he could print t-shirts with it. And I was like, no, I will give you an option online that you can purchase from my store, you know what I mean, if you want that on a t-shirt, but I'm not sending you this photo for you to use it. So yeah, there's you know, there's things that I'm okay with in that world, and then there's other people that, you know, I'm not okay with that. You know, it's like, this is my work. I dictate what gets done with it, you know, so.
And that is a very good question, and that is also a very long-standing issue as well with artists. Very long time, and I think that's always a conversation that continues to be had, because now they're talking about like this perpetuity, like that artists could potentially lose out on, like what you did with the guy in LA. That's huge, and I think sometimes artists just don't feel like they have that power to say, even though it's theirs.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they don't have the power to say no, you can't use it.
Yeah.
And I think they just don't do that often as much as they should.
And you fall into that, I think, a lot with this world of photography here that I'm involved with a lot, where like somebody feels like it's my car, like I can use this photo, and it's just like, no, like copyright laws clearly say it's mine. I shot it, and you know, if you really wanted to go into that, you know, like saying this is my car, I can use it. Well, then I got to go into like who created that paint, who created, you know, you got to look at who designed that building, who created those, you know, and it could go on forever. You know, so it's like, no, it stops here at me. This is my photo.
Right, buck stops here.
Yeah.
Mr. Motto.
Yeah,
Love
you
it.
know. Yeah.
You want to speak about your book?
Oh, yeah. I'm a terrible promoter of my own work. So, for a long time, a friend of mine in Texas, we would go back and forth about products and things with our work. And so I always said I was going to make zines, photo books with my stuff. And I threw him probably 100 ideas and never did any of them. And beginning of this year, I hate snow, But I always I enjoy the first snowfall. Other than that, you can get rid of all of them. I don't want to see it at all. And so, yeah, the first of the year, New Year's Day, there was a big snowfall, if y'all remember. I jumped in my truck and ran out and was taking all kinds of photos. And while I was out, it somehow got in my brain, like, I should make all these photos into a zine. And I was just like, I'm doing it. And it's going to happen, like, now. Like, this is the only project I'm working on for the next, till it's done. And so, yeah, I created a zine. Like I said, I'm a horrible promoter of my own work, so I probably posted it twice and that was it. And so I've got a lot of these. And if anybody wants it, these are all photos from Racine that I shot on January 1st this year. And it's got a little bit of my humor and the captions on certain pages. So, you know, it's...
And how much is that?
25. And it's roughly, I think, 40-something pages. I forget. There's a lot of photos in here. Yeah, so if you're interested, they're here at Mahogany. So.
And then also, excuse me, all the work that's exhibited on the walls is also for sale, except for that one.
Except for the one.
Right. So you can reach out to myself or the other or Rene and inquire about the cost of those. So I want to thank everyone for coming. This is we're going to wrap our first Mahogany Dialogues Artist Talk up with Rene. So Rene, you made history here because you started this whole thing off.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure was all ours. Just on the flyer, if you see the flyer, there is the schedule of events for the remainder of this year at Mahogany. We also have a garden that we're building in the back, Romeo's Garden. So there's more information about that as well. The goal of that is to create another outdoor space, outdoor art space that's connected to the gallery. So we're in the process of building that. And also, we do have a membership program for our Black Arts and Cultural Center. So if you're interested in becoming a member, it's really simple. Just go to the website, mahoganygallery.com / become a member. And have any questions about that, we'd love to have your support. And thank you for Tyler, that's for coming from Racine Art Museum, and everyone else who came to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it was here with us here at Mahogany. So thanks again.
You get me going, I'm going to talk a lot.
What's that?
I said, you get me going and I'm going to talk a lot.
Yeah. Well, we're teachers. That's what we do, right? All right. Thanks a lot to everyone. Thank you, Rene.